So welcome to the IDRPP's Autism Echo. My name is Tori Coons. Janelle, who normally facilitates this, cannot as she's lost her voice. So if you recognize my name, I'm project support for Project Echo, and I send out a lot of the reminder emails, so that's probably where you've seen it. I have the privilege to introduce our housekeeping slides before we hear from our presenter, Dr. Terisa Gabrielson, which we are very excited for. Just to kind of cover some of the basics, we record our echo sessions for educational and quality improvement purposes. By participating in this session, you consent to being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, feel free to disconnect from the session. We wanted to thank and do a big shout out to the children with special healthcare needs at DHHS for providing funding for this project. I'm sure Janelle probably has a lot more that she could say about it, but I do not. So just a big shout out and thank you to them. Some key components of our echo sessions are, first, we have a subject matter expert, which is Dr. Terisa Gabrielson today. We also call this section like our didactic speaker. Then we have a case presentation or discussion, and I think for this topic, we're going to do more of a discussion. So that will be at the end of her presentation. And then lastly, we have professional networking. Echo is an interactive community. To support that, we ask our participants to be engaged in asking questions after our didactic speaker and to provide feedback or ideas during our case presentation or discussion. Case narratives are an amazing way to solidify skills that we learn in our didactic presentations and to receive direct feedback and advice. If you haven't presented a case narrative yet, please consider doing so. We highly recommend it, and we love to hear from you guys. In our echo sessions, we ask our participants to respect the presenter by using the chat or raise hand feature to ask questions or contribute. Keep questions brief and on topic. Introduce yourself and your organization before you ask a question. And we also love it when you guys turn on your cameras during the sessions, as it helps with connection, building community, and making networking more meaningful. As our discussions often surround our experiences with kids and families, please protect these individuals' privacy. We ask that you avoid using identifying information such as their name, as well as the names of family members, friends, or coworkers. If you have any questions as to what would be considered identifying information, please reach out to a hub member. All of our hub members will have or do have an asterisk before their names, so they will be able to be identified through that. For this session, we ask that you rename your profile to your first and last name, state, job title, and organization. To rename your profile, click on the participants icon in the bottom menu of the Zoom window, your profile, and then rename your profile in the dialog box. Today, if questions come up during the didactic presentation, we ask that you put them in the chat rather than raising your hand. And then if we do need to raise our hands during the community questions or discussion at the end, to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, you can hover your mouse on the Zoom window to locate the menu, select participants, and then click the raise hand option at the bottom. By attending this session, you can earn professional development credits. To do so, please fill out the survey that will be being dropped in the chat throughout the session. Canvas is where we store all the information to prepare for review and implement the strategies discussed in our echo sessions. If you would like access to Canvas, email autismecho@aggies.usu.edu and we will send you instructions for how to register. Case studies, as I briefly mentioned earlier, are where we share information about real-life situations, hear from colleagues about recommendations, and receive valuable feedback to take and apply. If you are interested in presenting a case, reach out to autismecho@aggies.usu.edu and we can help you get that set up. And again, we really do like to hear from our participants and their cases. It provides such valuable insight into what you all work with, as well as different ideas that we would not even cover or talk about otherwise. So please, if you do have a case, we'd love to have you present it. To stay connected with everything Project Echo, you can follow our Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. That often has our announcements or anything exciting that comes up. And so that's a great way to stay connected with all of the amazing things that are going on in Project Echo. Without without any further ado, I would like to turn the time over to Dr. Teresa Gabrielson, who is our presenter today. So I am good. Teresa, if you want to share your screen. And you are on mute.
I did have to unmute. Okay. Thank you. And I'm just scrolling through participants. I see some familiar names, so shout out to all the people and friends that I've worked with in the past. Happy to have you on the call. And I will try to, let me get the chat open. So if I can, nope, can't do that. So I will need help with the chat because I'm not able to open it while presenting. I have a lot of slides. This is my intense interest for sure. Some of them I'm going to speed through because they probably don't apply to you, particularly those that have to do with adults. And I've just notified spelling errors on my slides, so I'll fix those too. But I want to give a shout out to my collaborators for much of this presentation, Kavena Begay in University of Washington and Beth Couturier-Barraga here at BYU have contributed quite a bit to this work. And my co-authors, my only disclosure is a book that we have published on assessment of autism in females and nuanced populations because it's not just cisgender females that we're talking about, and they range from all over the country, and you may recognize some of their names as well. Our learning objectives is to identify barriers, and in some ways that's mission accomplished. Currently, as school psychologists anyway, we are facing an avalanche of referrals for girls, so it might be that we're reaching everybody that we need to, but I'm not sure what it's like in your arenas. There are problems related to missed or misdiagnosis and identify best practices. So, who are we talking about and why, if you don't follow the prevalence studies like I do? One in 31 is our number right now. When I started my career, it was 1 in 150. And so that's a dramatic increase. The male to female ratio is of interest for this talk. There is some movement on the male to female ratio. It's always been 4 to 1 for a long, long time. And now the latest data is 3.4 to 1, and other data suggests 3 to 1 or 2 point something to 1. So the landscape is shifting towards more recognition of girls for sure. The median age at diagnosis, we don't have gender data on that, or maybe we do. Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, and put those in there. So these are just some graphs from the CDC study just to show you like who is identifying kids with autism in general. And you can see there's a lot of it that's only coming from schools, and that would include um, the Part C, that eligibility is coming in. Some of it is only clinical, some is only records, and some of it is from a diagnostic statement. This is Utah, and these little things are socioeconomic levels, where low income levels are being identified um, more often, which is a goal we've had for a long time. Again, we're going to kind of shoot through this pretty fast. In the past, one of the problems was if you were female and you were autistic, that meant that you had intellectual developmental disorder. And now that's changing. And that's shown here in the IQ numbers, where it used to be like all of the girls were in that IQ under 70 group. And now we have a lot more breadth of representation across all of the IQ ranges for girls who have been identified. This one is just to show you the 4-year-olds are showing even more increased prevalence and faster and higher, which is also mission accomplished. We want the kids identified earlier. And so good movement happening on the national scene. And Utah is also doing a pretty good job. There's another study outside of the CDC that's specifically looking at gender. So relative increases, adults are you're not concerned with adults, but their diagnosis levels are increasing dramatically. Female children, 300% increase from this study. And this was in the Kaiser hospital system, which is large and across multiple states. So different methodology a little bit, but just tremendous increases. So as you see those numbers go down, that doesn't mean that autism is going down. What that means is, oh, What did I do? Sorry. Let me resume. Okay. We got it back? What that means is the disparity between males and females is going down. So again, that is very good news. But there are still some barriers. I'm going to go through them briefly. And maybe you are over these barriers, but you have to explain them to other people. And it could be clinicians or it could be families. So accuracy of measures is more likely to apply to clinicians. And this is the ADOS Module 4, which is for teenagers and adults. But they really looked at it to say like the ADOS Module 4 in particular does not do a good job of identifying females with autism. So that's something like to tuck into your brain as we do more of these studies to say the measures we've already used that don't have separate norms between girls and boys may not do a very good job with girls, and we just didn't know it in the past. So this is a reference you can use. Um, Also, the idea of self-report data being really important is noted in this study because self-report data may not match between informants even. So the probands listed here are the people with autism answering, and then the family members here are not reporting nearly as many autistic traits as the people themselves. So if you're dealing with a population of littles, self-report's not going to help you at all. But just keep that in the back of your mind too. It's like when we ask autistic people, they will tell us, and their families may not notice or register quite as much. Um, and then this is another one saying essentially the same thing, except they specifically identified gender as the reason why the measures aren't saying the same thing across reporters or across measures. So the girls are a new ball game essentially in assessment world. We're all learning to adapt to it, and that's what I hope we're doing today. The other tricky part is gender identity and sexuality is really fluid in autistic populations. These are some quotes from studies that we have done where, like, I even knowing you're a girl is sometimes very later in life. And so this can complicate things as well. And one of the questions I get is like, well, which norms do we use, male or female? And I usually say both, so that you get a comprehensive picture. Camouflaging is a term that almost everybody knows now. Some people call it masking, some people call it passing as normal, or like you'll see it abbreviated PAN sometimes. But it's something that is initially subconscious or unconsciously done. And then over time, you get to be more aware that you're doing it. Everybody does it. It's less common in little tiny people. But over the years, you learn like if I want to fit in socially, I'm going to have to look and be what people expect. So I can learn to look like and be like what people expect, but I'm not very flexible in that, and so that becomes pretty exhausting. And then the other issue is if it's you're pretending to be somebody that you're not, that can be psychically pretty exhausting too. Impression management is another term that's not associated with autism, but that's what we all do. First dates, job interviews, even like do you dress up to go to the grocery store? Like all of that is impression management. So we do it all to some extent. Question is, are you are you not recognizing who you really are or thinking that who you are is not acceptable? Therefore, you must be or look like somebody else. The diagnostic odyssey has been a problem. All of these are more likely to be identified before autism if you're sending people to a psychologist or a physician or a neurologist. Many of these will come out first. And this is in adults. I would say for littles, you're more likely to see ODD and OCD and ADHD diagnosis. And I'm not saying that those are wrong. I'm just saying those are usually the first look diagnoses that you're likely to see. And then the other barrier we have is diagnostic overshadowing, where just the difference between males and females and how you think about males and females. Co-occurring disorders are there, male or female, it's pretty much the same, But if we look at them by gender, a male with exactly the same co-occurring disorder will likely be recognized as autistic versus a female. And this one's a little bit older. It's 10 years old now. So I hope that's been changing. Behavior problems may kind of hit you guys where you live. These quotes are obviously from older girls, but um, the top one is like back in the day, they didn't really help me. They just put me down to being a really naughty child. So as a very young child, before she learns how to mask and cover and etc. or camouflage, they she might be really criticized for being naughty and or non-compliant, which is not a favorite term anymore, not following directions well, um, wandering off when and not staying with the group is one of the more noticeable ones in young children, in young girls, and for example, not recognizing personal boundaries, not recognizing what circle time actually means. Those are the things you're likely to see in a young child, but also like they're just not seen as acting out as much because they're trying really hard to be accepted and fit in. And the note about how home life is very different. So be sure we're talking with mothers. And the one this just breaks my heart. You know what? I could have got more help if I had just burnt more cars. So like we don't want to be in that camp of not noticing until it gets severe. We want to be picking it up very early. And one of the reasons people have trouble with that is they compare girls that we might have an autistic concern with to autistic boys in their preschool, kindergarten, whatever, younger grades. And they're like, no, she doesn't look anything like him, so she couldn't be autistic, and that's the wrong group. We really need to look at other females. She's not going to be anything like autistic boys. She'll be a lot closer to neurotypical boys and very different from neurotypical girls. So, kind of shifting that mindset away from gender bias, which I think is one of my later sides. If it feels like, whoa, this is so much, that's true. It is, and that's actually the problem. So parsimony is the idea of like, all right, are we really dealing with five, six, seven, eight different diagnoses, or is it one? And we're just not seeing it because we're not used to thinking of girls having autism. And often once you open your minds up to that, you're like, well, of course, it's been there all along, but I just got lost along the way and everybody was saying something different. So hopefully by either the end of today or our second session, that'll be a little bit easier for you to tease apart. The bias that we're hoping to avoid has been longstanding, and it actually is one of the biggest barriers because the bias has kept girls out of research for decades. And these numbers are 8 to 1 was a study. That's this article. They looked at all the autism studies and their inclusion of males or females in the study, and they came up with a ratio of 8 males to every female. So when a researcher said, this is what we know about autism, it really is what we know about boys. And that may not represent girls very well. 4 to 1, we mentioned, is the CDC prevalence. 2 to 1 is other studies when we drop the requirement that participants meet a certain score on measures that aren't normed on girls in order to be included in research. And then some have suggested even a 1 to 1 ratio. If we knew the true nature of things, it would actually be closer to 1 to 1. And we don't know that. And I'm not going to dwell on some of these more complicated slides other than they show females consistently have slightly lower traits. And so that's one of the key things to keep in mind. They're not likely to be the bigger noticeable traits. They're very consistently somewhat lower. And that's going to help us in thinking about assessment and identification. So this is referring back to that study, but it's a cuter picture. Eye contact, we all use eye contact. Girls are much better at it, just in general, because they know it's expected. It doesn't mean it pains them any less. They just know it's expected. And so they have conditioned themselves to do it more. Better response to joint attention, again, because they really have a high drive for social acceptance. And so they are imitating better. They are paying more attention. They're trying to do what people are expecting them to do in order to meet their social goals. So they're better at a lot of things that we're not used to with the autistic boys, but that doesn't mean autism is not in the mix. And it doesn't mean that they're good at it, they're just better at it. So here are some of those conclusions. Yes, there are sex differences, and they exist in the general population. This should not be newsflash to anybody. Like men and women are different. They have, I usually start this with like the heart attack thing. It's like when women have a heart attack, it's like Tuesday. I mean, they feel mildly nauseous. There's diffuse pain. You know, it's not like there's a Mack truck on my chest for men. Everybody kind of knows that now. And it's the same thing for autism. It's not the big obvious that we've been taught from research. We have this other way that girls can look that we don't have as much research to teach us about. And hopefully and that is changing. Ever since 2020, there's been an explosion of research. Some of our older ways don't account for that. So insistence on meeting criteria on any specific instrument is not going to help you with girls. We need to adjust those expectations until we have gender norms, which we don't in many cases. And clinician training is, I mean, most clinicians are starting to come on board. I think that's a nice feature of COVID. So much information came out starting in 2020, moving forward, that a lot of people are getting the message. Um, I'm going to do this slide and the next, and I'll pause for just a sec to see if there's something in the chat that I need to attend to. This one is one that broke my heart. I love these studies. This was done in the UK, but what they did was give educators and young educators of young children. They gave them some vignettes or descriptions of behaviors for two kids named Chloe and Jack, except it was actually four different scenarios. And the ones you see with the blue symbol were the traditional, what we're going to call right now a male presentation of autism. The traits that we are used to, for decades, this means autism, but they named one of the kids Jack and they named one of the vignettes Chloe. So even though like Chloe is obviously a female name, the traits were recognizable, and these educators, or at least 70% of them, recognize it as autism. But when we made a list of the traits that we're now associating as describing females with autism, if we named those set of traits Jack, we got better recognition, not as good as the male traits, but better. But if we named that exact same set of traits Chloe, the recognition dropped down to 55%. I mean, that's a problem by itself. But here was the big problem. And that is, if we ask those same educators, would you seek help from your school psychologist? Everybody would have received help. Well, not everybody. It's like this is like a 55% line. About half the time, these kids, Jack with the set of kind of female traits, meaning less obvious, Chloe with the obvious traits, but named Chloe, would have received help. I don't know why this Jack wouldn't have received it quite as much, but they're still like 50% of the time they would have been referred, but Chloe would not have been likely. It was only 42%. And I've been thinking about that today. It may be that they didn't think she needed help, but I think she does need help. So the point is, like, the school psych would not have been notified that we're noticing these traits, or even consulted for poor Chloe down here. All right. Okay, I lied. I'm going to do this one thing and then I'll pause to look at the chat. So this is a very creative study. And if you've seen this picture, play along, please. They were trying to see the differences between autistic boys and girls. In 13-year-olds, everything was matched about these 13-year-olds. The clinician was part of the drawing. It was a turn-taking drawing task where the clinician would draw something and then the participant would draw something, and then the clinician would draw something, and then the participant would draw something. And I hope I'm saying this right. I think the clinician is the color drawing. And if you're red-green colorblind, green is on the left and red is on the right. and they would just take turns drawing, and that was the only instruction. They just took turns back and forth. So I'm going to, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to put it back up. Let me check the, Colin, can you check the chat for me? Because I'm going to have to put that up.
Like you did, so you can keep going.
Okay, is that good? Okay, I can see it now. Well, nope, I can see my closed captioning. Let me see. So what I'm wanting you to put in the chat is like, which one is the boy? The red one or the green one, or the one on the left or the one on the right? Let me no, I said it already, so I'm gonna have to live with it. Which one is the boy? I wanted to say the girl, but since I've already said it and you've already put in the chat, let's go with that. So yeah, Colin, if oh, there it is. I can see it now. Okay, we got a green is the boy, the red is the boy, the red is the boy. I say left, green, red, green, red, green, green, red. Okay, good. Now if you can just put in the chat like why green because or red because. And again, we're asking about boy because that's how I started. Anybody want to say why? Both are girls. Oh, Crystal, you are devious. That's awesome. Green is more active. Red seems more aggressive. Good. Everything looks big. And Crystal, is that green or red? Everything looks big green. Okay. So that's why you're thinking that's the boy. Green is simple. Okay. Green, red seems more aggressive. So you think that's the boy. Girls have more perspective and in dimensions. Rochelle, is that red or green? Faces seem to be a boy drawing. Sorry, red. Okay. Red seems to follow theme of the evaluator. I would guess the girl would be more likely to add a picture. Faces seem to be a boy. Red doesn't show faces as much, so I guess red is the boy. Okay, let's give it away now. Can you let's see. Okay. I'm on the I'll leave it here for just a second and then I'll go back to presenter mode. Can you see my cursor? Yes, no. Yes. Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. Anybody see this? And just unmute if you know what this is and tell me. No one's willing to say it, right? Okay, this is
Is it farts?
it is a fart. Thank you. Yes. It took me a long time to figure that out, but yes, this is a fart. So once I say that, people go, "Oh, this one's the boy," right? A butt. Yep, you're right. So that that does kind of give it away. The green is the boy. Some people get caught up in this braid, this green braid, and say it must be a girl, but I would point out that the green is actually the clinician. So not so much, but like once we know it's a but, like, okay, but that's also our social bias about boys, right? Who would draw a fart? Well, that would be a boy, and that's social bias. The thing that I see in these pictures is the green one on the left, we're chasing the kid all over the page, meaning he's not responding very well to what the clinician is laying down. He's moving on to his next thing instead of joining. And if you look at the red one, which is actually the girl, you notice there's a lot of imitation. There's a lot of duplication. There's two chimneys, there's two windows, there's a car, there's a little dog, I can't I don't know what that is. I don't know. There's a fish. There's a duck. I mean, like the girl is kind of on board with everything that the clinician's laying down. But it is aggressive, and some people thought, well, that's a boy. A boy would do that. So there's social bias everywhere. Let me see if I can stop sharing, get back to my full screen. real fast. And maybe I can't, and that will be okay. Hold on. And slideshow from current slide. All right. But it just illustrates everybody has bias. We all have ideas in our heads about what girls do and what boys do and what they're interested in and what they're not. And that can interfere sometimes with what we are seeing clinically. So problems. Suicide's a big problem with girls. Ann Kirby up at the U has urged people to be cautious about some of these results. This was just because of methodology. Is it an emergency? I still think it's anytime we talk about suicide, it's an emergency, no matter what. But just the odds of distress, we can just say that, between females and males are much, much higher. So that's an impelling reason to catch it early, like you're doing. Like, and many of the women say that their psychic distress does really go down dramatically once they're identified. So yes, early intervention is going to help them at least reduce some of these distressing thoughts, especially about their desire to leave the world. I give you a minute to read this quote about self-harm. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of girls self-harm for many reasons. This one has kind of a nuance to it about sensory, about trying to be heard, about trying to call attention to themselves that something is wrong. Um, Victimization is a huge issue because there's also a bias. Well, if she has autism, she would not be attractive, and that is absolutely false. And attractive girls are victimized very easily, especially if they don't know how to read situations well. Um, I've talked to many women who have been raped multiple times because they did not consent but got tired of pressure. And so they just wanted the pressure to stop, and they really didn't have the tools to say what they wanted, to give consent, etc. So, I mean, this is a long range reason. Education is a huge reason to make sure that she knows what her strengths are and that other people around her know what her strengths are as well. And these are actually quotes from women who said, like, I just left school. And because someone, quite frankly, a teacher was sarcastic to them and they didn't understand it correctly, and they left school. And they're brilliant and they could be great contributors, but they're not. They're misunderstood. So we need to kind of pull back and look at the whole picture. And not just at, here's my checklist for autism and she doesn't meet my checklist. Let's pull back just a bit and look at the whole picture of what's going on with her. And here are some of the things to keep in mind. You need to get a comprehensive history. That will tell you a lot more than just looking at her once. These are some of the things, and this is this is Paul Carbone's work, so it is looking at very young children. And what we're all already noticing, and it's attention span by this is Hispanic and not Hispanic kids, language use, repetitive behaviors, stimming, and self-injurious behaviors. And then these are the two that they came out as significant, and that was aggression and sleep disturbance, where there's more in females. Wait a minute, more sleep disturbance in um, females than males, and the other one is less aggression. So that reference is there if you need more. And if any of you don't have access to these studies and you want them, you're very welcome to email me, autism@byu.edu. And this is another one that if you're interested in, I'm happy to send to you. I just can't post it for copyright reasons. This is a very good map for, it lays out all the DSM criteria. It lists all of the research that shows what it looks like for girls. So it is evidence-based, and it's a very nice guide for what you should be looking for, as is this paper. And pink flags does not mean girls. it means less than red. So we're used to seeing very obvious signs and they're just more nuanced. And if we start seeing a lot of these add up, then we can form the gestalt or the full picture. So comprehensive evals are the way to get enough data to form a full picture and not just say, well, I did the ADOS, she didn't come up, we're done. The ADOS may not tell it to you, and you'll need to see other assessment data to see if we are looking at autism or not. ADOS is fine, ADR is fine, but diagnostic decisions should never be based on those alone, especially because they don't have separate norms. For girls, really think about family. Autism is a heavily genetic condition, and talk to moms, talk to teachers. They live in girl world. They'll know if she's different. Not everyone would pick it up, but like the adult females in her life may be seeing differences based on their experience growing up female. I'm not going to dwell on these genetic slides. They just say the risk is higher. I mean, risk is a poor word, but the difference in genes is much more in girls and moms, actually, in these studies. And here's a better look at that. Like here's people with no autism in their family, have very little genetic differences. The dads have, I mean, they're halfway along the spectrum. The moms are closest to the kids with autism. So we can't just think, well, girls and women don't have autism. Like actually, their genetics are much more diverse than men. So the chances are present and possible. Parents will often see, so this is now getting into what you're going to see and hear. Parents will say, no, she's really good. She's really good at reading. She's really good at this. Therefore, she can't have autism. And so they'll focus on the competence, which we would all do. And those of you who have autistic children, you'll remember this, like, no, she's a really good reader, or he's so verbal or whatever, or he looks me in the eye, she looks me in the eye. And that is what the parents are holding on to, and I've done it myself too. Um, to say like, no, it's not autism, but that's one of the barriers is parents are hanging on to those positive traits and maybe not reporting the other traits that we would pick up on as a clinician. So the other thing I get is like, she's so social. In fact, she's really concerned about like fairness and sticking up for people, but that's because she's working her guts out to figure it out. And so if that's a really hyper attention for her. You can't see this picture, but this little girl is actually lining things up on the window well, on the windowsill, sorry. She still may have difficulty, but like, and because she has difficulty with nonverbals, she works her guts out for social. So that looks like good social skills and social motivation is very high. And you're not used to that with autism, but in the girls, it's pretty high. And that's hard for them to deal with if they're not accepted. And so they just try harder, 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 which looks like she's really social. And here's the other way they look really social. Out on the playground, she'll be kind of flitting around all of the groups trying to get in or fit in. So if you observe her on the playground or during free time, like she'll be on the periphery of a lot of groups. She'll try to get things going. She doesn't often know how to do what everyone else is doing. She'll try. It won't be accepted by the group. She'll often be ignored. And so she'll go try somewhere else. And so if you talk to a playground date, it's like, yeah, she plays with all the kids on the playground. She's great. She's not great. She hasn't been accepted into any of those groups, and she just keeps trying. The other thing with play I wanted to emphasize is as we hear more and more from adults with autism, sorry, some of the things we criticize about play are sometimes very helpful in terms of being in a state of flow or comfort in repetitive play. And that we often criticize solitary play. And you want to notice that, like she's always playing by herself, but what's the context? Did she try and other kids wouldn't accept her? Does she voluntarily do solitary play? And if she does, it actually can be helping her to regulate or recuperate from a rejection, for example. And it may be the same play every day. I mean, it may look great, really good pretend play. And if you do a one-off observation, you're like, no, her play's great. Watch her again the next day. And you'll likely see very repetitive play if you have the opportunity to watch her over time. And even though it's fabulous, it's the same script over and over again. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying like that's indicative that solitary play is using to give her some comfort and that repeated play is using to give her comfort. Also, the bullying you're not likely to see, but know that it's there and watch for it more carefully because it's going to happen as she makes social mistakes. She's going to start to be bullied. And this idea at the top, like I was only antagonizing them by being myself because she does make social mistakes. And an adult may not see them because they're fleeting, but the kids are going to start to accumulate them. And many, unfortunately, will start to be really mean to her. And it's where you wouldn't think. It's at school, it's at church, it can be anywhere. And it's devastating. Language is usually pretty good in girls, so you'll usually go like, check, yeah, her language is great, especially if she's talking about her interest. Her language richness and spontaneity and variety is going to be good because it's something she's expert in and well versed in, and so it can sound like a fabulous conversation. If you talk to her the next day, listen to see if you have exactly the same conversation the next day, if it's rehearsed. Um, Listen very carefully for her prosody or the sound of her language. Um, know that language could be advanced, but that it's not, in some way, it's not really typical of her age. Prosody, the sound of her language. It's not just, almost never in a girl, it's almost never the mechanical flat that people are used to looking for. It's more like sometimes it's really breathy, sometimes it's really rushed. Sometimes it's never finishing sentences, or sometimes it's just odd, but it's just not the classic autistic prosody that most people would recognize. But if you listen carefully, you'll hear it. And I, quite frankly, I close my eyes sometimes to listen to see, like, okay, okay. And also watch for the little nuances of sarcasm and jokes, and for the kids who aren't understanding them, and just watch them more carefully. And a lot of mimicry. So if you hear like you're really mimicking something that you've seen, on a video or something that you've heard on the playground, kind of pay attention to how much that mimicry is going on. And if it's a lot, I would start watching her more carefully. And then the intense or special interests. Um, are pretty mainstream. So you're not going to see the odd interests as much in young girls. What you'll see is a ton of fantasy, a ton of animals. In many cases, not all, obviously, but like a lot of them are into something to a large extent that seems pretty mainstream for their age, but as they grow up, they're going to still be in that interest and their peers will not. And so they'll start to be bullied and made fun of and left out unless they learn to kind of tamp down their interest and pretend to adopt the interest of their peers. Um, Sensory intolerance. This is, I mean, it's my favorite quote, not because I like it, but because it does really sadden me to think that sensory intolerance is the difference between me having a quality of life or not. So these are hard to hide. Um, Intolerance for noise, intolerance for the feeling of clothing, smells, and taste are pretty pronounced in girls. So watch for these. That doesn't mean she has autism if that's what you see, but like start adding this to the list. And my concern about sensory is that as she gets older, if it's around the taste and smell of food, is that we may have her tipping over into an eating disorder, which has happened. And okay, I'm going to stop right there on executive function to check my time. And I know we have another week to finish because I'm getting into that point about what do we do, but I want to check my time. So do I have time or do we need to stop for your case?
No, you
No,
still have
sorry.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Janelle. And I'm sorry, your name was Autism Echo, and I couldn't remember your name.
No, you're so good. Sorry, I was just about to hop on. I didn't know if you were just looking at the time or if you wanted a confirmation.
No, I was confident. Okay, so give me a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, we're gonna try and kind of change over around 1. So you have about like
Perfect.
14 minutes
Okay,
with questions and any interaction and stuff.
excellent. Let me check the chat really fast while I'm here. Okay, so we're good. All right, let me go back and I am watching my clock. So I will stop at 1, and that actually may get us to where we need to go for this part. The vastly overlooked thing in girls is executive function, and partly because she looks really competent in many ways, but I really encourage you to look at executive function, even in preschoolers. And this is where you'd see it in a preschooler. So like, um, it's hard for her to switch gears. That's an executive function problem. She's rigid and its transitions are exceptionally hard. Accepting someone else's ideas, exceptionally hard. And this mom says it's impossible for someone else to make her do something. So have your ears alerted for that, and I'll show you ways to assess for that. But people always miss executive function, including me initially. I missed that part too. And part of it was because all the early research on executive function in girls said that they were better. And that was true, but they were using like clinical measures that weren't real world measures. They were like actually testing their executive function in a DKEFS, which is a neuro test, and they'd say, no, the girls really outperform the boys. But in real life, when we ask them about their real life and ask their parents about them in real life, the girls, which are the solid color bars right here, have high scores, which means more difficulty on executive function than the autistic boys. And they were matched on IQ. Their IQ is typical. Their ADOS scores, that's an ADOS 2, not an 11. Oh no, it is 11. So their ADOS scores were matched. They had about the same level of autism. But look at the girls. Every category, they have more difficulty with executive function. And that's only because we ask them to rate that we ask their families to rate them. If we test them directly, they can nail it, but in real life, they don't. Let me go back to that one real fast. See this highest one right here, shift. And this is on a measure called the brief. And there's a brief preschool version. Just so you know, brief adult, preschool, school age. This is their most impairing aspect, but this is also a diagnostic criteria for autism. This is the inability to shift topics. It's the inability to transition to a new activity. It's the inability to change their mind once it's set. That's something that I always look for in the data, is to see that big spike for shift as self-reported or parent reported as like this is our biggest issue. So here's the good thing about executive function. They have gendered norms because there's different social expectations for girls and boys related to executive function. So this is one of the measures that would be really great to use because it does have gendered norms. And interview her, if she's old enough to talk to her about this, like what's hard for her. And they're usually, I mean, because they're autistic, they will tell you if you ask them in most cases. They'll tell you what they're struggling with, but nobody asks. And I mentioned the DKEFs. This is good for teachers and parents to like talk about daily life and how much you have to adjust to her difficulties with shift to make life work. Cognitive abilities are pretty good in general for the girls. versus our old image of autistic girls as having, if you were autistic and a girl, you had an intellectual developmental disorder, because that was kind of the only way you would get people's attention, because otherwise it looked either milder or different and wasn't recognized. But that's changing now. Cognitive differences are not well documented in the literature, but they do exist. So going deep into a topic of interest can really boost your cognitive abilities, especially vocabulary. But it might be harder for you to make mental connections. Like if you're, when you're evaluating cognitive abilities, we look at like, what is this? What is this? And definitions, those are pretty easy. But when we try to establish relationships between ideas and how are these two things alike, that's more abstract, and they can still do it, but it's harder. So I look for patterns in the data where concrete stuff is easier, abstract stuff is harder. And it doesn't mean it's like below normal or typical. It just means it's harder for them. And a lot of women tell me I have a man's mind because I'm very logical. People tell me that all the time. So listen for that, watch for that. Highly variable cognitive profiles, if you're doing any kind of assessment, just indicates neurodiversity in general. And then memory skills can be all over the map. Sometimes like uh, incredible memory, and then at the same time can't remember what you just told them to do like 2 seconds ago. So like really mixed on the memory skills. Oh, the CARS, that's the HF, the Childhood Autism Rating Scales. HF is for 6-year-olds and above and who have typical cognitive function. The regular CARS is for kids under 6. Childhood autism rating scales. It's a good way to look at those disparities because you have to, one of the items is like how big of a gap is there between cognitive and adaptive, and I went the wrong way. So some of the adaptive skills have to do with self-care. And although I know many autistic women who are absolutely perfect in every millimeter of their personal hygiene, it's pretty intense. That's one of their, often one of their interests is like they have to be absolutely perfect in their hair, their clothing, their makeup, etc. But I know other women who don't shower except for twice a month because it's just too difficult because of the executive function involved with all of the products, all of the routines, getting things in and out of the bathroom, getting dressed, keeping your clothes from getting wet. There's just too much. Even motor skills like braiding and combing can be difficult if you're autistic. Getting dressed, putting on a bra, that's not for your population, but like executive function is hard. So in a young child, it would be toothbrushing, it would be washing your face. It would be going to the bathroom. And I will say, in the girls that I know, the most common developmental delay that is reported is late toileting for them. So, like, that comes too many executive function steps. Not for all, but like that's a very common developmental delay. It was like, well, no developmental delays. Oh, except toileting was late. We're going to talk a little bit about burnout. This is something that adults tell us about, but young girls also experience, they just don't know what it is. And it has to do with the effort to try to be accepted every day. And when you aren't accepted, you try harder. And when you're still not accepted, you try harder and harder and harder. So that effort results in pretty significant burnout, and you're not always seeing it. Um, because like adults think you're doing well, and it may look like on casual observation you're doing well. If you watch them a little bit longer, and especially their parents at the end of the day, like after preschool, if the girls are just totally wiped out, I mean, that's normal when you start, but if that continues, year after year, where school just wipes her out, these are things that you'd want to dig deeper into. Um, it's she doesn't necessarily know that she's doing it. Sorry about that overlap. She doesn't know she's doing it, so she can't really express it to you, but you'll see it. And like the teenagers, I have a lot of girls that come home from school and go to their room and shut the door. And parents get pretty bugged about that. And they're like, no, you have to come out, participate in the family. So I know one girl who wraps herself in a blanket and lies underneath the kitchen table because that meets her need for recovery and her family's demand for her to participate in the family. But like she can't. She's been working her guts out all day long and she just needs to have the demands pulled back when she gets home. And usually, and I don't put a limit on it, but many tell me after an hour or so of like no social demands, they are rested and recovered enough to come back out and try to interact with the family. So just know that even with our girls group, we used to schedule them at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and the girls would always drop out. So we finally asked them, like, what time do you want our girls group to start? And they said as late as possible. And it turns out 6 was pretty much as late as we could go. But that hour made a big difference. When we did social skills groups at 5, um, they dropped out like flies. When we shifted to 6, nobody has dropped out. So like the time at home to just chill is really important. So as we're looking at how to identify, um, we really need to adjust a lot of things. And if you're interviewing autistic women themselves or girls, you have to adjust your interviewing style. And I would argue you should do that for parents as well. Again, autism is a genetic condition. And in my work with teenage girls, there's a huge percentage of parents who are also autistic, and many of the mothers are also autistic. And they don't realize it initially till their girls are diagnosed. And then as they recognize themselves, they seek and receive their own diagnosis. So even if it's parents, like think about your interviewing style. Open-ended questions are really hard. And my best example is, how's your sleep? It's fine. That's an open-ended question. If I say, what time did you go to bed last night? And the answer is 4 a.m., then I have a lot more information than I did if I said, how's your sleep? It's fine. So think about that, get examples for everything. Always ask about suicidality and eating disorders because those are life-threatening. In your very young populations, it's not unheard of to have really young children, especially if they have good language abilities, say, like even 4 and 5 year olds say they want to die. And if that's happening at 4 and 5, we really need to know about it and take act, even though they may or may not have the means to do that. Like we really need to pay attention to that level of distress and reassurance. Um, these evals are going to have to be done over time for all the reasons I mentioned, and because you're going to see the traits better over time as her ability to camouflage gets less, she's less and less able to camouflage, and we start to see the repeated patterns over time and realize they're not as functional as you thought they were. Think about your male bias, and it's, like this back to the red and green picture. We all have them. We all need to think about them and question, are we thinking about her in a certain way just because she's a girl or just because he's a boy? And what if I flipped that? That's a good mental exercise for you. What if she was a boy? What would I think? What if he was a girl? What would I think? And I think that's helpful in assessment. Talk with other clinicians. I mean, this is always good advice to help you not get so deep into data that you're missing a pattern. Someone else can look at it and say, oh, there's your problem. And you're too deep into the data. So consultation is a good idea. We will talk about supports next time. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there other than to say, whoops. Oh, shoot, I didn't want to go back out. I want to go back. There we go. I'll just do it this way. Shoot, there was one I just wanted you to see. This one was important. So this is an autistic female character from Dungeons and Dragons. She is, I hope I'm saying this right, Asteria. And the inner picture for most of the women and adolescents that I work with is that by myself, in my world, I am powerful. I am the princess. I am the paladin. I'm the holy warrior. I can do anything. It's when I step outside into my environment that I feel that I'm disabled. And we'll talk about this next time and supports next time. But yeah, I can stop right there. Thank you, Shanda, for interpreting. Appreciate that. Okay.
Sorry, I was just typing a message really fast.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That was so educational. I know I very much enjoyed it. And thank you for ending right on time. Like that was spot on. Just to give a little bit of time in case anybody has a question that they would like to ask Teresa or to herself rather than like to discuss in breakout. I'm gonna give you guys the chance to put something in the chat or to come off mute, raise your hand. So if anyone does, feel free to speak up.
Okay, I'm listening, but I'll also respond to the ADHD in the chat.
Oh yes.
Okay, then if you
I'm
see
gonna
any hands raised, let me know because I'm not seeing those. So that article that I showed you, the one by Ming-Xuan Lai, where it was called Towards Equity, addresses autism and the DSM criteria and all the evidence for what autism looks like in girls. And then the next half of the paper is ADHD with the same information. Here's the ADHD diagnostic criteria, and here is what it looks like in girls, and here's the research for that. Tremendous crossover. Look at the social. That's one thing I look at. I look at developmental history. And I look very carefully at executive functioning. Although they both have executive functioning challenges, I look at where those challenges are. So just saying executive function doesn't tell me, but if I look at that graph, if all the patterns start to say like shift is really high, that's going to go on the autism pile for me. And I'm picking up some language differences. That's going to go on the autism pile for me. It's a matter of weighing, and it's absolutely possible to have both as well. It's tricky. You really need to look at a lot of aspects. But that paper is really helpful to lay out the differences, and I'm happy to provide it to anyone. Autism at byu.edu. I just can't post it because of copyright, but I can share my private copy.
Thank you, Linda, for that question, and thank you, Teresa, for that answer. If anybody else has a question, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat or
I'm watching.
Perfect.
Oh, the potty training law. Is there a specific way when a child gets diagnosed that we can emphasize this can be because of autism? I think schools often pair autism children who are potty trained with other ASD students. And I'm not sure the question in there. As far as I understand the law, if you have an IEP, you are exempt from the potty training law. If you don't have an IEP, you are not exempt. I don't know if that's the practical aspect of it or not. And I'm happy to chat further, Gwendolyn. We did, I mean, I will say we did try that, and there was an issue at school, and just making the teacher aware, making the family aware, it resolved fairly quickly. The change in environment resulted in a lot of accidents at school, and just when everybody became aware, that's when things relaxed. The child was better relaxed. Everyone else was more relaxed about it. They weren't, the thing is, they weren't forcing her to go to the bathroom, and it was the forcing that became the problem. Oh, and Gwen, the IEPS is, and that's an accommodation, I believe. But yeah, as far as, thank you for posting the training requirements. In my experience, when the IEP mentions toileting, that means you have to take them to the toilet. And in the example I just gave, that was actually the problem. It was much better for her to be able to initiate it on her own. And that was one case, but I would be specific. Are they toileting, or are they allowing her to wear a pull-up at school? And I don't know if that helps. I'm happy to chat further if you want to email.
Again, thank you, Gwendolyn, for the question. If anybody else has anything else they would like to ask, you're welcome to. Natalie, go for it.
Teresa, I have a question about your executive function testing in girls. Do you only add that on if it's not clear? Like, is that part of your regular testing, or do you just add it if, okay.
No, that is standard, absolutely. Executive functioning, that's what helps you decide, A, is there some neurodiversity going on? Is it ADHD? Is it autism? I'd absolutely do executive functioning. That's key. A comprehensive eval is very extensive, but that's
About
standard.
the male. So I'm seeing in my clinic some like adolescent males showing up for diagnosis, and it feels like some of these things that you're talking about as pink flags are also true in that older male that I'm seeing show up to the clinic.
Yes, that's what the nuanced autism part is. And that's always been there, but it was easier to see in males. But as they get to the social environment where they are no longer able to keep up socially, that becomes the executive function becomes something that parents are expecting them to become more independent in, and they're not. I mean, the nuanced ones are really tricky. And I don't know, some of you have been around long enough to remember my mentor, Judy Miller, when she was in Utah, and we had one adolescent male in our social skills group, and she said she was back and forth about his diagnosis forever until she did a home visit for like 5 hours. And being at home, she's like, oh, he's totally autistic, but we just weren't seeing it. So really listen at home. So I've always remembered that story.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalie. Again, I'm going to ask one more time. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. If not, it might be a perfect time to move out into our breakout rooms. So hub members, you should have already been contacted with what questions you're going to talk about. Janelle, if you'd like to open that up, I think we're good to transition. A little bit late to rejoin. Just with our couple of minutes left, I know we had a really great discussion, so I hope you guys did as well. As we have such a limited time, I am probably going to postpone talking about what we discussed as a group, and just highlight that if you guys want access to any of those recommendations or ideas, kind of conversations that were talked about and taken notes on, if you send an email to autismecho@aggies.usu.edu, we can give you access to Canvas where all of that information is stored. Just to kind of give a closing announcement, we have our next session, February 25th, where we will continue talking about autism in girls with Dr. Terisa Gabrielson. So I know I'm really excited, and I think just based off of our discussion that this is a very applicable topic in most of our lives right now. So I think that's going to be very exciting. In case you didn't get the chance to, go back and fill out the survey that Janelle has been dropping in the chat. That's how you get credit for attendance. It also gives us valuable feedback into any ways that we can change or improve the sessions or any topics that might be fun to talk about in the future. Again, thank you for a big thank you for Dr. Terisa Gabrielson. We look forward to seeing you again next month. And for our hub members, we love hearing all of your guys' feedback and ideas in our discussions and breakout groups. So thank you to all of our participants as well. And with that, I'm going to close this out and say thank you to you all and hope you have a good afternoon.